Hello, welcome to the 2022 to 2023 CAASPP Essentials Training for Site Coordinators. The purpose for today's session is to equip test site coordinators and site leadership with the necessary information to support a successful administration of the CAASPP assessments. On today's agenda, we will review the CAASPP assessments, important highlights and reminders, roles and responsibilities, test preparation, assessment accessibility, test administration, post-test, and how to reach the Assessment Services Department. Let's begin with an overview of the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, also known as CAASPP. The CAASPP website is your source for access to test administrating systems, training resources and materials, and important dates regarding administering the CAASPP assessments. The California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress Administration includes the Smarter Balance Summative Assessments for ELA and Mathematics, the California Science Test, the California Alternate Assessments for ELA, Mathematics, and Science, and the California Spanish Assessment. Let's dive a little deeper to understand all the different CAASPP assessments. We're going to start off with the general assessments. Students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 11 will take the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for ELA and Mathematics. These assessments are administered online. A student may be exempted from taking the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments in the following 3 situations. 1. The student is taking the California Alternate Assessments. 2. English learners who have been enrolled in a school in the United States for fewer than 12 months. This exemption applies only to the ELA portion of the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment. 3. The parent has expressed in writing that their student should be excluded from taking the summative assessments. The California Science Test can be administered to all students in grades 5 and 8 and once in high school. All students must take the science assessment by the end of grade 12, but have the option of testing in grades 10 or grade 11. The Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment for ELA and Math each consists of a Computer Adaptive Test, also known as CAT, and a Performance Task, also known as PT, which are presented as separate tests. The CAT adjusts the level of difficulty to the student's abilities, and the PT is designed to provide students with an opportunity to demonstrate higher order thinking skills to explore and analyze a complex real-world scenario. Smarter Balance recommends that students take the CAT and the PT items on separate days to minimize the effect of student fatigue. For each content area, Smarter Balanced also recommends that students begin with the CAT items followed by the PTs. The California Science Test is administered online in one sitting, and it consists of 6 segments, 2 discrete items, 2 PTs, and 1 segment is either a discrete item or a performance task. And lastly, a student survey. The test administrator must sign the online CAASPP security affidavit and receive training at their site before administering a test. We will discuss the expiration rule later in this training. The California Spanish Assessment is an online, non-adaptive, summative, grade-level assessment for students who are seeking a measure that recognizes their Spanish reading, writing mechanics, and listening skills. The CSA is an optional assessment for students in grades 3 through 8 and high school. The California Alternate Assessment for ELA, Mathematics, and Science are computer-based summative grade-level assessments for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities whose IEP designates the use of an alternate assessment. These students are receiving grade-level instruction using alternate achievement standards in grades 3 through 8 and 11 in ELA and Mathematics. In addition, students in grades 5, 8, and once in high school will participate in the CAA for Science. Students who are identified for an alternate assessment will take the alternate assessment in all eligible content areas. A student is eligible if the IEP designates the use of an alternate assessment. The CDE recommends the IEP team to base their decision on the following. The student has the most significant cognitive disabilities. The student is learning content derived from the Common Core State Standards and the California Next Generation Science Standards. And the student requires extensive, direct, individualized instructions and substantial supports to achieve measurable gains in the grade level and age-appropriate curriculum. The test examiner must be a certificated or licensed teacher most familiar with the student. Prior to administering the alternate assessments, test examiners must complete the online Moodle training and sign the security affidavit in TOMS. The CAA for ELA, Mathematics, and Science are delivered one-on-one by a test examiner and use the same test delivery system as the other CAASPP computer-based assessments. The CAA for ELA and Mathematics are multi-staged adaptive assessments, and the CAA for Science is delivered as 4 embedded PTs, which are administered one-on-one by a test examiner during the course of instruction and shortly after instruction of related science content is complete. The CAA for ELA, Mathematics, and Science will expire in 45 days from the day the student starts a test. Second scoring is the process of having another educator, known as the secondary test examiner, TE, score a student's rubric scored items simultaneously yet independently from the student's primary test examiner. Ideally, the secondary TE is a teacher who is familiar with the student's communication modes. The purpose of second scoring is to establish and document standardized scoring procedures. Second scoring is one method of providing scorer reliability evidence. The results of second scoring will be used to satisfy a federal peer review requirement. The second scores will not be used for official scoring or reporting purposes. The secondary TE must be credentialed, receive training on how to administer the CAA, sign the security affidavit in TOMS, and be assigned a TOMS account with a test examiner user role. Now that you understand the CAASPP system, let's review some important information. Alt for All addresses concerns about determining student eligibility to take alternate assessments. Alt for All means a student who meets the criteria for one assessment should meet the criteria for all assessments. IEP teams should determine test assignment for an individual with the most significant cognitive disabilities. Training is required to administer the California alternate assessments. The Moodle training site allows test examiners to access training for the CAA for Science and CAA for ELA and Math. The general section must be completed by all test examiners, regardless of the content area being administered. Test examiners must view the training videos and answer all the check for understanding questions correctly to receive a certificate of completion. You will need the access code presented on the slide to complete the Moodle training. The call for science is currently open and available to administer. The CAA assessment is only available for in-person administration. The CAA for Science embedded performance tasks are intended to be administered shortly after students receive the related science instruction rather than all in one day or even over several consecutive days. Prior to administration, educators must complete the Moodle training. CAA for ELA and Math will be available to administer April 10th through June 14th. State and federal regulations require parents and guardians to be notified about the statewide test administration. Sites are responsible for obtaining parent notification and parent exemption forms. Parents have the right to excuse their child from participating in the CAASPP assessments. Parent exemption forms must be completed by the parent and signed by the principal. Please scan and email to ojang@sandy.net. Parent exemptions will affect the 95% participation requirement. 95% of students in all schools are required to take annual standardized tests in reading and math under the No Child Left Behind Act. This includes all subgroups, such as SPED students. 95% of these identified students need to test as well. Once you receive a parent exemption form, there are only two condition codes test site coordinators may set in TOMS. NET, not tested medical emergency, and PGE, parent guardian exemption. These condition codes should be assigned as soon as the coordinator becomes aware of the condition. Setting condition codes prior to the start of the testing window will ensure that a student is not inadvertently tested. The CAASPP system will be unavailable for scheduled downtime from April 7th through April 10th. Systems will go offline at 5 p.m. the evening prior to a scheduled downtime day and will resume at 8 a.m. the day following a scheduled downtime day. Now let's review the roles and responsibilities of a site coordinator, test administrator, and test examiner. Site coordinators must ensure that all designated supports, accommodations, and unlisted resources are entered correctly into the TOMS and CAASPP system. They are also responsible for maintaining registration accounts for educators at their site for administering, reporting, and using the TOMS and CAASPP system. They must also collect and file parent exemption letters and enter condition codes into TOMS. Test administrators do not need to be credentialed per CDE policy. They can administer general, interim, practice, and training tests, cannot administer the CAA for Science, CAA for ELA, and Math. And they need to work with the site coordinator to maintain accounts and resources in the TOMS and CAASPP system. Test examiners must be credentialed per CDE policy. They can administer all exams, including the CAA for Science and CAA for ELA and Math. Prior to administering any CAA for Science embedded PT, test examiners must complete both the general and the CAA for Science section to obtain the certificate of completion. They must work with the site coordinator and test administrator to maintain accounts and resources in TOMS and the CAASPP system. The site coordinator, test administrator, and test examiner must ensure that the SSID number is provided to students prior to testing. You can obtain the SSID number from PowerSchool and create a label. Email is not considered a secure distribution method. Now let's discuss how to prep for the CAASPP assessments. Before testing, students, test administrators, and test examiners should be familiar with a computer-based assessment. One way to do this is to use either the practice test, training test, or interim assessments. In addition to preparing the students for online assessments, the practice and training tests can help students, teachers, parents, and guardians become familiar with item types and accessibility features of the online testing environment. There is no limit to the number of times users can access the practice and training test. Educators can proctor a practice or training test just like the state test by using the test administrator interface. They will need to log on and set up a testing session for the students. During proctored sessions, students can pause the test and return to it while the test session is active. Practice tests mimic a full-length operational test. In a standardized administration, educators can assign students the practice test to take individually and use the students' results to inform instruction. In a non-standardized administration, educators can display practice test items to students and engage them in a class discussion about the items and the responses. Educators can use online practice test scoring guides and DFAs when proctoring a practice or training test. Training tests allow students to become more familiar with the online testing environment. It is shorter than the practice test and built to provide initial practice and exposure to using the available item types and accessibility resource. Performance tasks are not included in the training test. This table provides a list of all practice and training tests available by grade and total number of items. Students can access open source practice and training tests via www.caaspp.org on any web browser. Test administrators may set up a test session and have students log in through the secured browser, which simulates the testing environment and allows the students to complete a test over multiple sessions. What are the interim assessments? The interim assessments are optional tests that measure what students know and can do using the Common Core state standards of ELA and mathematics. The interim assessments are versatile and can be administered to students in either a standardized or non-standardized manner. There are three kinds of interim assessments: the interim comprehensive assessments, the ICAs, and the interim assessment blocks, the IABs, and the focused interim blocks, the FIABs. More than 120 interim assessments are available for use. The ICAs are built on the same blueprint as the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments. Each ICA contains approximately 35 to 45 items. The IABs focus on smaller sets of targets to provide more detailed information for instructional purposes. Each IAB contains approximately 5 to 15 items. Why are the interim assessments given? The purpose of the interim assessment is to provide teachers and administrators with results they can use to support teaching and learning. In addition, the interim assessments provide meaningful information for gauging student progress toward mastery of the skill measured by the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments. Who takes the interim assessments? Although developed for students in grades 3 through 8 and high school, the interim assessments can be administered to students at any grade level, kindergarten through grade 12. How are the interim assessments given? The Smarter Balanced interim assessments are computer-based tests. Unlike the summative assessments, which are adaptive, the interim assessments have a fixed number of items. Some interim assessments contain items that require hand scoring. All hand scoring must be completed locally by school or district staff. When are the interim assessments given? The Smarter Balanced interim assessments are given for use at any time during the year. TOMS stands for Test Operations Management System. TOMS is a secure website that permits the site coordinator to perform several tasks for test administration. For best performance, download the latest version of Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. You can also find a TOMS manual at the CAASPP website. The TOMS system will allow you to review student data, verify correct tests have been assigned to students, enter designated supports, accommodations, and unlisted resources for students, enter condition codes, and report security incidents and submit appeals. To help prepare for testing, the site coordinator can use the following reports: School Level Student Test Assignment Report, School Level Student Test Setting Report, Unlisted Resources Report, and School Level High School Participation Report for CAST and CAW for Science. These reports will provide information on students in your school who are assigned to take certain assessments. This may be your first step in determining testing schedules and is helpful when monitoring testing. The table contains rough estimates of the time it will take most students to complete the Smarter Balanced assessments based on the time it took students to complete the summative assessments in prior years. This information is for scheduling purposes only, as the assessments are not timed. Estimated testing times for the computer adaptive test portion of the Smarter Balanced summative assessments have been adjusted to accommodate for the use of the Smarter Balanced adjusted forms. Performance task testing times are unchanged. Estimated testing times do not account for any time needed to start devices, load secure browsers, and log students on, nor do they account for breaks. Also consider that Smarter Balanced recommends that students take the CAT and the PT items on separate days to minimize student fatigue. Administration of the CAST is estimated to take approximately 2 hours. Note that the CAST is an untimed test, and the CAST is composed of 5 blocks of test questions, 2 or 3 blocks of discrete standalone questions, followed by 3 or 2 PTs where each PT is a block. It is strongly recommended that a PT be started and completed in a single test session with a break after either the second or third block of test questions. Now let's discuss the importance of assessment accessibility. Students with specific learning needs may require accessibility resources to fully engage and demonstrate mastery of content during instruction and on assessments. To better serve them, CAASPP provides a wide range of resources to ensure that the administration of the test meets the needs of all students, including those with disabilities. The purpose of accessibility is to provide students an equal opportunity to demonstrate what they know and what they can do. It is also a more accurate and complete picture of student learning. Educators must enter all designated supports and accommodations in TOMS 48 hours before testing begins. Educators must verify that the student's designated supports and accommodations are correct before approving the student by clicking on the View icon. Please remember, when you enter any information in TOMS, it takes at least 24 hours for the information to be active. Please do not conduct any testing until you have waited at least 24 hours. Teachers should not test a student if the designated supports and accommodations are not set. Let's discuss the different student accessibility resources. Universal tools. Universal tools are available to all students based on student preference and selection. Designated supports. Designated supports are available to all students who can benefit from them and must be indicated by an educator or group of educators. Accommodations. Accommodations are available if specified in the student's IEP or Section 504 plan. Designated supports and accommodations must be set in TOMS prior to testing. Unlisted resources. Unlisted resources are not on the approved list of universal tools, designated supports, or accommodations. It must be made available if specified in the student's IEP or 504 plan and only upon CDE approval. Requests must be submitted to the CDE 10 days prior to testing via TOMS. If the CDE determines the unlisted resource changes the construct being measured, the student will not be counted as a participant for accountability purposes. Supports are offered as embedded or non-embedded resources. Embedded resources are those provided to students within the computer testing interface. Non-embedded resources are those that are not part of the testing platform but offered locally by the site at the time of testing. The California Assessment Accessibility Resources Matrix displays the embedded and non-embedded universal tools, designated supports, and accommodations allowed as part of the CAASPP system. The Individual Student Assessment Accessibility Profile, also known as ISAP, is to assist site coordinators in collecting information on identified designated supports and accommodations. The ISAP tool is an Excel workbook that assists in assigning, collecting, and uploading test settings for a batch of students. The ISAP form is a document that assists in assigning, collecting, and entering test settings for one student at a time. The next topic to explore is test administration. Before an educator administers an assessment, they must sign the security affidavit in TOMS. To do so, go to the CAASPP website and click on the Test Operations Management System. The test security affidavit should appear immediately. In 3 to 4 hours, your electronic record will transfer to the test delivery system and you'll be ready to start administering the CAASPP test. Before testing, verify student test assignments and ensure student test settings are set a minimum of 48 hours prior to student testing. Teachers should log into the test administrator interface before the first day of testing. Teachers need to disable pop-up blockers in order to create a test session. What is needed to test students? Statewide Student Identifier or SSID number. Accommodations or designated supports need to be entered in TOMS. Computer for the test administrator. A computer for the student, and headphones for students in a group administration. Educators will also need preparing for administration or PFAs and directions for administration, also known as DFAs, for test examiners administering the CAA, which are available for download from TOMS. Scripts for administering the Smarter Balanced for ELA and mathematics assessments, the CAST and the CSA. What is needed to test students? You will need the student's SSID number. Accommodations and designated supports must be entered in TOMS. A computer for the test administrator. A computer for the student. And headphones for students in a group administration. Educators will also need directions for administration, also known as DFAs, to be used on the day of administering the cause. Preparing for administration, also known as PFAs, to be used in early and advance of administering the cause. Scripts to be used on the day of administering the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments, the California Science Test, and the California Spanish Assessment. For test security, cell phones or other unauthorized electronic devices are not allowed to be used during testing. All cell phones should be turned off or put on airplane mode and put away. A test administrator or student may pause the test for various reasons. Here are some examples. Technical issues such as power outages or network failure. The student may need a break or to end a test session for the day, or student inactivity. Let's discuss the pause rule. The pause rule applies to the Smarter Balanced Computer Adaptive Test for ELA and Math and the California Science Test discrete item blocks. If the test has been paused equal to or less than 20 minutes, the student will return to where the student left off within a segment and be able to revisit previously answered questions in the current segment. If the test has been paused for more than 20 minutes, the students will return to the last page containing questions with which the student has not yet interacted with. If a student is paused while working on a response, the partial response will be submitted and unable to be revised. There are no pause restrictions for the performance tasks. The students can pause for any amount of time and still return to any previously answered items within the PT's current segment. It is recommended that the pause occur between PT segments and not in the middle of a PT. Please be aware that idle activity will cause a student's test to time out. This means that while a student may move or click the mouse on the page, the student is not actually engaging with the test. Before the secure browser logs the student off the assessment, a warning message will be displayed on the screen. Selecting OK will restart the 30-minute inactivity timer. The system recognizes activity as selecting or entering an answer and using navigation tools. Moving the mouse is not considered activity. Note that there is a 30-minute timeline for idle activity. Once the 30 minutes are up, the test will pause and the 20-minute pause rule timeline starts. Students must answer all test items on a page before moving to the next page. Students may not return to a test segment once it has been completed and submitted. Students will receive a message at the end of each segment prompting them to review answers before continuing. Each test must be completed within a certain number of calendar days after the student logs on to the test for the first time. PTs for the Smarter Balance Assessment for ELA and Mathematics, including the interim assessments, have an expiration timeline of 15 days. We still encourage all PTs to be completed in 3 days, as this will allow schools more flexibility in scheduling test sessions for the PTs and should result in fewer reopen appeals. The CAASPP for the Smarter Balance Assessment for ELA and Math, the CAST, the CAA, and the CSA all have a 45 calendar day availability. For the CAA for Science, each embedded PT has its own 45-day expiration. For new coordinators, the key here is to not start a test unless you know you'll be able to complete it prior to test expiration. This means that you should not start anything before spring break, a holiday, or a time the student will not be in school for the next few days. To request that a expired test be reopened, the coordinator should file a Security and Test Administration Incident Reporting System or STARS case. When a test is reopened, the expiration rule is 10 days. The online STARS and appeal process is available in TOMS and must be used by the test site coordinator to report a test security incident or other testing issues that interferes with the administration and completion of the assessment. STARS is a streamlined process and appeals are automatically generated after the online form is submitted. There are 3 types of testing incidences listed from most serious to least serious. In the order of severity, they are breach, irregularity, and impropriety. Test breach is an event that threatens test validity and has external implications. Test irregularity is an incident that impacts an individual or group of students and may affect student performance, test security, or test validity. Test impropriety is an unusual circumstance that has a low impact on the testing and is correctable at local level. Here are some STAR case examples. For test breach, test administrators or test examiners modifying student responses or records, allowing students to take home test questions, passages, or scratch paper, or test items shared on social media. For test irregularity, students cheating or providing answers to one another, and students accessing or using electronic equipment. For test impropriety, students making distracting gestures or talking, disruptions such as fire drill or internet outage, a test expiring before the student could complete the test. In the following circumstances, there is no need to report an incident by submitting a STARS case. If a student used an electronic device after testing was completed, if a student with a PGE condition code is accidentally administered an assessment, an English learner enrolled in a U.S. school less than 12 months who took the ELA test. The student's score will not be used for accountability purposes and therefore does not need to be reported. There is no need to report an incident by submitting a STARS case if question skipping. The system does not allow students to skip unanswered questions. Media use after testing is complete. The use of unauthorized electronic devices is only reported if the student was actively engaged in testing or the student completed testing but used a device to help other students that were still testing. What do you need to do once you've completed testing? You must destroy all used scratch paper, student login sheets, and the CAA DFAs. Please complete and submit the principal certification and apportionment form to ojang@sandy.net or drop it off in the school mail to assessment services. The forms must be submitted by June 14th, 2023. You can find student score reports in TOMS and in PowerSchool. Linked in this PowerPoint, you can find the quick reference guide to bulk download student score report in TOMS and how to print individual student score reports in PowerSchool. If you have any questions regarding the CAASPP assessments, please refer to the slide should you need to reach out to a team member. Olivia Jang is the District CAASPP Coordinator, and Erica Simmons is the Director of Assessment Services. Thank you for participating in the 2022 to 2023 CAASPP Essentials Training for Site Coordinators.